How are you, gentlemen? All your base are belong to us. Because that's all you care about, isn't it?
Oh boy, it's the Zero Wing. The famous Zero Wing, the famous all your base Zero Wing. And it's on Nintendo, Sega, Genesis, Switch Online expansion pack thing that I got for some reason. Actually, there is a reason. Maybe someday we'll get to it. But in the meantime, we got Zero Wing, which is a different kind of horror. I mean, look at this dude. He's kind of scary, no? So, you know the story, I guess. You know, somebody set them up the bomb, or set up them the bomb, which blows up this starship here, but not before they take off a bunch of Zigs for great justice. Basically, small fighter crafts, so you play as Zig, and must blow up other ships little, you know, for the great justice. I think that's how it goes, more or less. Originally an arcade game before being ported over to the Sega Mega Drive in 1981, released overseas by Toaplan, creator of many great shmups here and there, Zero Wing has you moving Zig through 8 stages of shooting action. It's a fairly standard horizontal scrolling shooter where you blow stuff up, avoid crashing into things, and pick up power-ups to increase your chances of your survival. Said power-ups come primarily in the form of colored orbs, which will grant you 2 additional pods situated above and below you, useful for absorbing bullets among other things. Your weapons comprise a red spread shot, blue lasers, and green homing shots, and these weapons can be upgraded by collecting orbs of the same color up to a certain point, at which point you'll earn points, maybe a 1-up, perhaps even a 10-up for fuck's sake. But wait, there's more. In addition to your main guns, Zig is equipped with a tractor beam gimmick that can be used to capture an enemy ship and basically use them as a shield against attacks, or you can catapult your captive prey towards the enemy, which really doesn't do much, but it's a cool little visual, I suppose. Other pickups include speed boosters and a bomb that can be catapulted to things to blow them up. Like any other shmup, one hit will cost you a life and warp you back to a previous checkpoint while resetting Zig to default settings. Lose all your Zigs and it's game over, but you have some continues. The game has a difficulty setting as well as the ability to set your starting number of lives up to 4, and the option to toggle rapid fire, which I leave on because I like my thumbs and treat them good. Zero Wing is a pretty standard shmup for the most part that follows the formula well enough. The different weapons you attain are the usual genre staples, nothing out of the ordinary but relatively useful in places. The overall scrolling speed is largely manageable, control is relatively tight and responsive, though I'd be weary of attaining one too many speed boosters. One is usually enough, and the second one already has you zipping all over the place, which is not a good thing for levels that require some tight maneuvering, as it were. It eventually becomes the one power-up you actively want to avoid. Otherwise, it's a perfectly acceptable scrolling shooter and quite a fun one when you're on a roll. That's the only real knock on it though. It's quite derivative of other shooters, and while the tractor beam is a neat gimmick on paper, I hardly ever use it once my guns are at full strength, and I end up forgetting about it more often than not. Not an encouraging sign, I tell you, but that's about all it is. As a shooter, Zero Wing does what it does just fine, and that's about all you could ask for from a shmup of this ilk. The game looks fine. Poor meme-worthy translation aside, the opening cutscene is not a bad introductory piece of Mega Drive cinema. Your Zig changes color slightly depending on the weapon you acquire. The level designs are pretty stock techno-themed, cavernous-looking stuff and that sort of thing. The sort of levels you find in these sorts of games. And the enemy designs are nothing you haven't seen before. Somewhat derivative, but still fairly detailed and sinister stuff. Zero Wing does suffer from the occasional bits of slowdown when too much shit is flying around, but that is usually to your benefit to avoid all the bullets on screen. I also wish your options were a little more visually distinct from your ship, because they do tend to blend with each other at times, especially during narrow passages where they sort of clump together, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of which is an option that can absorb the bullets, and which is the ship that absorbs fuck all. Other than that, again, game looks perfectly fine. Sound in Zero Wing is also pretty standard fare, with some techno-themed tunes serenading you throughout the game. Some bear a catchy beat, but most tend to blend together because they sound somewhat similar and samey to each other. Sound effects are also fairly stock standard explosions and laser blast things on the Mega Drive, nothing out of the ordinary here. Overall, Zero Wing is what I would call a perfectly acceptable space shooter thing that attained a level of notoriety because somebody at the Toaplan translation department sucked at their job. Regardless, it's a competently executed game with a fair share of challenge and some fun stuff here and there, but nothing that would challenge some of the higher-end shooters of the era, I feel. Still, if you're into shmups and you haven't played this one yet, I'd say give it a go just to knock one off the list. Oh, I mean for great justice or something. I don't know. I grow tired of this joke. Good night.